I sort of ran out of time. I don't like to talk about it that way because whatever in a way, but I'm inclined to try and start roughly on schedule so that I can say all the things that I'm inclined to say. Hi, Brian Jacobson. If you don't know, I've been in the community about 10 years, so I feel like roughly I know a lot of faces, and maybe a lot of people know mine. The Mohawk helps with that, and hurts, because here's what I'm discovering. I had somebody after the first presentation say that it took him some time to get over my Mohawk to be able to listen to my words. And I said, I'm discovering that, not to stereotype, but in general, men who are about 60 and over tend to find my Mohawk quite distasteful. That's what I'm discovering. Yeah, it's interesting. Well, none of you may. I'm just saying, like the demographic that tends to struggle the most is that one. And it's interesting to me. At first, it felt like they were mad at me because as they lost their hair and thought I could still grow it, they were upset why I wasn't.
Amen.
Like, why don't you enjoy it while you have it? But the trick is, I don't have it. It just, this is where I get yield still. It's really thinning back here and really thinning here, and this is the best I can do with it. You don't need to know any of that. And if this is being recorded, hi. So I'm the pastor of the First Presbyterian Church here in town, so just a couple blocks, that way, orient myself, a couple blocks that way. I'll invite you to join me in prayer as we begin. I will need it to know sort of what to emphasize and for us to open our ears to what God has to say. Father, this presentation, as well as it is or isn't put together, surely can't represent all that you intend to do here. And so I pray that you give me words, and maybe more importantly, give us ears to really hear, to listen, to hear what you have to say. And then, by all means, God, the courage, the integrity, the humility to change our lives to match what you ask. So to whatever extent I nail that, to whatever extent I'm over the target of something you want to see happen, let us be responsive. We ask that in Jesus' name. Amen. You see, I've titled my presentation, Our Great Enemy, How Hurry is Killing Our Spiritual Lives. I actually like the name Suffocating Our Spiritual Lives better, but I'd have to make the font even smaller to make that work. I stuck with killing. My inclination when I put this presentation together too, and I thought about this title, was to think, I have a feeling that many of us, when we hear a person say our great enemy, and it's anything but something besides what the Bible mentions, we're going to have a response something like this, like, come on, man, come on, Brian, you're saying that hurry is one of our great enemies? I mean, doesn't the Bible already tell us we have some great enemies? Isn't death a great enemy? Isn't sin a great enemy? Isn't hell a great enemy? Aren't these the things that we fight against as Christians? Or actually not, right? In a manner of speaking, Christ is victorious. We just walk in his victory over these things. But that's a thing that gets processed as we go. Are you saying that somehow hurry ought to be put on this list? Well, I mean, yes and no, right? I mean, I'm not here to usurp the scriptures. I'm not here to tell you that I found some new thing that's better than what Jesus said. Obviously, these are true great enemies, and yet, I think hurry, I'm convinced that hurry, and when I say hurry, I just mean like busyness, this feeling of always rushing, this sense that, and I'll say more about this as we go, but you'll hear me talk about it this way, the way that so many of us live out of phase with the now. Yeah. That so many of us live somewhere in the past or somewhere out in the future. I mean, back to your conversation about your half birthday and when you get to drive, right? I mean, it's an exciting thing, but you got today to live in the meantime, right? And I think hurry is one of our great enemies because of how pervasive it is and how blind most of us are to it. I think of a story, a very simple illustration that I heard recently about an old man fish, here represented with a cane and a white beard and corrective lenses. I know, right? I nailed it.
Come on! Where's the guy?
Pretty much nailed it, didn't I?
While you're missing is the cane.
And he's asking these two young guys, hey boys, how's the water? And these two young fish respond by saying, what's water? Right? Because they just swim in it. It's not like we're aware of, in many ways, of the stuff we're in. We're just in it. And until we often step back or get some perspective or some age, we seem to so rarely understand the context that we're in. And the fact is, I think we could all agree that we live in a time that is in a hurry. We live in a world that is in a hurry. We live in a context of busyness, maybe especially here in Ortberg. I mean, for all its wonderful qualities, Ortberg is a community that so highly values achievement and success and getting places and doing things and getting things accomplished. One of my great griefs, honestly, as a pastor is watching how few of the people I lead seem to be able to relax. I mean, honestly, there are people in our church who go on vacation, and each day is so scheduled, they come back needing a rest. And so I look at that and I wonder to myself, why do we keep doing this to ourselves? We seem so unaware of the pace of our lives, so I really do think that hurry is a great enemy. I'm not the only one to say something like this, especially you younger guys probably will have no idea who Corrie ten Boom is. You've heard of her? She's a woman who survived the concentration camps in Germany in the 40s and then grew into this amazing woman of faith. And she says this, she says, if the devil can't make you sin, he'll make you busy. Carl Jung, one of a kind of world famous, now deceased, but world famous psychiatrist and philosopher, I don't think a man of faith that I know of, but I quote him in part because I think this is something that Christians and people outside the church see and note. He says, hurry is not of the devil, hurry is the devil. I almost put in here a movie clip, but I realized, I was just saying to somebody earlier this morning, I said, someday I want to preach to a room full of like 43-year-olds, that's how old I am, because then I could make all the cultural references from my youth and everyone would get it. You know, I would quote the movie The Usual Suspects, where the guy says the greatest trick the devil ever pulled was getting people to believe he didn't exist. I feel that way about hurry. Hurry is our great enemy because it's convinced us that it's the right way to do things. And we've just imbibed it without thinking about it, even as Christians. A man named John Ortberg, some of you will know him, he's a pastor in California, at a pretty big church there. He says it this way, for many of us, the great danger is not that we will renounce our faith. It is that we will become so distracted and rushed and preoccupied that we will settle for a mediocre version of it. He says the danger is we'll just skim our lives instead of actually living them. I was first introduced to this concept of hurry and pace and rush actually at a conference I went to where John Ortberg was speaking. And he was talking about a conversation he had with this guy named Dallas Willard. I just can't, if you have not read any Dallas Willard books, it'd be a bit much for you guys, honestly. It's like super thick, but in 10 years, come back to him. Philosopher, professor, just incredible man of character and faith. And he was a mentor. He basically discipled John Ortberg. They'd been in relationship for a while, and John Ortberg had reached a place where he said he'd kind of plateaued in his spiritual life. Maybe some of us have felt that way. You feel like you've gotten to a place and you're like, what's next? How do I get to that next level? How do I get to that deeper place in my walk? And John Ortberg felt like he'd gotten there, so he calls up his mentor, the man who's discipling him, Dallas Willard, and he says, like, what do I need to do to become the person God wants me to be? How do I get to that next level spiritually? And what I love about the story that he tells, I have a friend named Jeff, actually the guy, I do rough carpentry one day a week. I go kind of help build houses just to be around normal people. You know, I sometimes talk about how difficult it is as a pastor to like be around Christians all the time. It's not nearly as cool as it sounds. And and my friend Jeff is a bit like Dallas Willard. When you ask Jeff a question, sometimes he'll just say like, "Hey Jeff, what do you think about this?" And he'll go like this. He's my age, but he just shuts his eyes. He just takes his time. Sometimes it's like 10 seconds, 20 seconds, 30 seconds. Sometimes he'll sit there with his eyes closed for a whole minute while you sit and watch him. And then he gives you a really thoughtful answer. And John Ortberg says the same about Dallas Willard. He says he was notorious for long pauses. So they're on the phone, and John calls him up and says, what do I need to do? And he says there's a long pause on the other end of the line. And Dallas finally says, you must ruthlessly eliminate hurry from your life. You must ruthlessly eliminate hurry from your life. This is the story I heard about a decade ago that got me on this journey. And I love the way John tells the story. He says, okay, so he hears him say that, and then John thinks for a minute, and he says, okay, and then what else? Well, once I've done that, what's the next step? Okay, once I've eliminated hurry, what do I do after that? And Dallas Willard says, there is nothing else. And he goes on to say, hurry is the great enemy of spiritual life in our day. You must ruthlessly eliminate hurry from your life. I love that word ruthlessly, by the way. In case you haven't heard that before, here's what it means. Having no pity. Merciless. Cruel. It kind of struck me while I was doing this presentation the first time. When's the last time a pastor told you that you get to be merciless and cruel towards something? I feel like this is a real gift I'm giving you. You're going to be able to tap into all that like pent up whatever that's in you, or maybe it's like fine tuned. Maybe you've got like anger on a leash and it's right where it needs to be, but every once in a while you can let it go and it can maul something. Send it after hurry and just let it go to town, man. He's just saying be merciless about hurry in our lives. And it takes that because it's all around us. I mean, it's going to be, I really think, I like that you guys are here. It's interesting though. I haven't been 14 in so long. I can't remember what it's like hardly. But I'm guessing you feel the hurry whether you realize it or not. Or maybe you guys are so much into it. I don't know. Right? I watch my own 9-year-old son who's such a digital native now. Even just the ways he does things bother me. He doesn't even, I feel like he doesn't turn the Xbox off right. And it's just stupid that I would think that. You know what I mean? But he's so used to it that he does it his way. And I'm like, that's not the way you're supposed to do that. And I'm like, why am I being this way? It has nothing to do with hurry. It's just a confession. We've gotten to the point where my 9-year-old looks at me. He's like, Dad, is this your problem or is this my problem? Now he asked me that because I've invited him to ask me that, because often I'll come back to him later and I'll say, hey man, I'm sorry I came at you like that. That's all about me. It has nothing to do with you. So I'm sorry I came at you that way. So now he's asking me, like, Dad, is this about you or about me? So sometimes I'm like, it's about you. Sometimes I'm like, it's my problem. You're right. Don't own that. All right, so we need to ruthlessly eliminate it. I got introduced to this concept about a decade ago, and I'm not here talking about this because I've got it down. I'll share my own stories about how I'm failing at this on a regular basis, in fact, but also maybe a few successes. The question might be, how did we get to this place where our world is so hurried, so much divided? Before we get there, I think I'd ask, how many of you would just kind of confess, would you report that you live a hurried life? How many of you feel like this is describing you? A lot of us, right? I think a lot of us do this. About 90% of us here, that's about what it was there. I'd say probably, even for those of us who feel like we're living in an unhurried way, there are moments, I would guess, you'd confess there are times, there are seasons, there are stretches. And the same thing with me, like I raise my hand in the acknowledgement that I still haven't got this thing dead in my life, right? I think of it like hurry is a thing that I need to put my foot on its neck and keep pushing till it stops moving. That's the mercilessness, that's the ruthlessness in me as I think about it. And I feel like the thing's still alive. It's still squirming under my foot. It keeps slipping out. It keeps grabbing a hold of me. I can't get rid of it yet. I think of a story, in fact, I put this picture of Saukville because 2 weeks ago I was prepping this message. I've been in New Orleans for the week, and so I prepped this about a week ahead of time, and I was driving down. I decided to go down on Monday a couple weeks ago to the carpentry shop I work out at. I thought, I just got to get away from the church. I know it's going to be quiet because everyone will be out at job sites, and I'll just go down and be in the shop in this space. It's quiet, it's peaceful, I like it. It's away from Ortberg. It's a nice spot. And I'm driving down there and I realize I've got to go to the bathroom. And right around Saukville, I'm like, I have to pee so bad. And then I think to myself, yeah, but Brian, you got to get down there. Like next week, you're out of town all week. This thing has got to get finished. You know what the rest of your week looks like. You cannot stop and go to the bathroom. And it hits me all of a sudden right around Saukville that I am hurrying on my way down to Milwaukee to do a prep for a whole series or a whole presentation about how not to hurry. And it's amazing to me. It reminded me of a conversation I had with a pastor friend of mine that same week on Thursday. He said, Brian, often God will cause you to fail in the very area you're teaching about, so you preach from a place of humility rather than pride. And I thought, that's great. I kind of wish he'd skip the lesson this time, because I'm in a hurry, and I got to get down there. And so I just say that to say, like, I don't have this down. Even as I was preparing this message, I was rushing my way down there. Now, I did pull over in Saukville and use the restroom and had this great interaction with the lady who recommended just the right chocolate bar to go on my baguette for my little snack that I was gonna have. By the way, baguette with a layer of butter and some chocolate. If you haven't had that, it's amazing. Do you guys know what a baguette is? French bread. Panera is the only place to buy a baguette, by the way. Skip all the other spots, that's the place to go. So she recommends this chocolate bar to me, and she's like, tell me how that works out when you come back through next time. And I'm like, I never stop here. Don't you know I just force myself to drive having to pee real bad until I get to Milwaukee? Like, that's my MO. But on the way down the very next day, I called her and I said, hey, I forget what her name was. I said, is so-and-so there? And her boss answered. She's like, what do you need her for? She's afraid I'm gonna chew out or something like that. I'm like, oh, we had a great interaction. I just want to fill her in on how it went. Okay, so this woman gets on the phone and I say, yeah, I'm that guy who got the chocolate bar from you yesterday. And she's like, oh, I was just thinking about you 5 minutes ago, she said. I was like, oh, well, that's cool. I said, I just wanted to let you know that was a great recommendation on the chocolate bar. It paired perfectly with my baguette. She's like, oh, that's great to know. I said, good human connection. Have a great day. You know, I just think to myself, like, if I'd been in a hurry, I would have missed all that. I would have missed this beautiful interaction with this woman I may never see again. I don't know if she's a believer or not. Hardly matters to me in one sense, right? Because we just had a meaningful connection because I took the time, despite my desire to be in a hurry. Well, how we got here, so, right, the world has been wrestling with this idea of hurry for a long time. In fact, all the way back in 200 BC, this playwright, this poet named Plautus, back in the Greek Roman Empire, he said this, he said, the gods confound the man who first found out how to distinguish the hours. Now watch this, he says, confound him too, who in this place set up a sundial to cut and hack my days so wretchedly into small portions. 2,200 years ago, when the sundial was invented, people were already complaining about how they felt rushed by it. The very concept of measuring time as it travels through, as we travel through our day, already started to feel like a constriction on the way we live. And this is more than 2,000 years ago. Fast forward to 1370, when the first public clock was put up in Cologne, Germany. Now, clocks had been around a little while. Monks had developed a clock, actually, so that they could pray the hours. Monks pray typically 5 times a day, sometimes 6, it depends, if they want to do like the 2 a.m. one or whatever that means. But, right, they'll pray certain hours of the day, and so they invented clocks so they could keep track of the rhythm of it. Lo and behold, this technology that was meant for good, I think has come to result in so much evil in our world in a way, because the clock changes our relationship to time. I was just confessing to my brother here that, so I'm the pastor of a church. I'm kind of my own boss in a way. I respond to people, I report to people, there's people I answer to, but on a daily basis, no one's calling me to say, like, Brian, when do you get in the office? But I get to decide when I go in the office. And yet still, I look at the clock, and if it's 7:55, I'm like, gotta get over there by 8. What? Why do I have to get over there by 8? Nobody's telling me I have to get over there by 8. What is it about 8:00 on the clock that compels me so? Why not 8:03? Why not 8:22? Why not 8:44? Like, what if I've got something else better to do than just getting in the office and sitting there? And yet and I realize some of us are beholden to, like, clocking in, clocking out, somebody managing us and all that, and there's different relationships we have to it, but keep moving on of how we got here. In 1878, Thomas Edison more or less invented, although people will debate whether Nikola Tesla had anything to do with it, right? So whatever, but the light bulb came into existence. And just an example of how much the world has changed and what it's meant to us and how we got here. Before the light bulb was invented, people slept 11 hours a night on average. Now you can imagine, because especially in the winter, think about a Newsburg here. Think about, you've got a limited supply of candles, a limited supply of oil, or whatever is going to run your lamp. Your family doesn't just have like oil growing on trees, so you're going to have to manage those things. The sun goes down at 4:30 and comes up at whenever it comes up. How are you going to spend those hours? Well, I don't know, but you're not going to use all your supply for the winter of candles and oil, so you're going to manage that and then get a lot of sleep. What do you guys think today, How many hours do you think, I'll put that up there so you can kind of see, how many hours do you think that people average today? 5, you think? Ooh, that's tough, that'll be tough. 6, 7, it's 7 hours that we average today. 4 hours less sleep. Can you imagine just what difference it would make if we averaged 9 hours of sleep? I mean, I'll tell you, brothers, that's the thing I'm practicing. That's a spiritual discipline I'm on right now. I'm just trying to average at least 8 hours of sleep a night. I'll tell you, it is a blessed thing to be alert all day long without the need for caffeine. Now, I drink caffeine, I enjoy it, but I'm not drinking it because it's the thing I need to wake up. I wake up alert. It's amazing. It's like a whole new world for me. It's wonderful. John Mark Comer, the man whose book I have been using in many ways to put this presentation together, but also who borrows this idea of, it's called the ruthless elimination of hurry. He got that from the conversation between John Ortberg and Dallas Willard. He says this, he says, when the sun set our rhythms of work and rest, it did so under the control of God. God's the one who sets the seasons in place, who tells the sun when to come up and when to go down and all that. But he says, but the clock, and I might add, and the light bulb, is under the control of the employer, a far more demanding master. Right? God is gracious in ways that employers are not, typically. Then 2007, something else happened. Who knows what happened in 2007? What was invented then?
Social media.
Right, the smartphone, I mean, shortly thereafter, right? Because then a world of trouble started coming along with that. I think a lot about these things, about how fast the world moves right now, and I think there's a temptation or a tendency for us to try and get some perspective. Like sometimes I try and step back and say, is the world actually moving faster today than it was, or is this just that thing where every generation feels like their generation is moving a little bit faster than the one before? Honestly, I think it is moving faster. It is just, the invention of the internet has changed everything. 10 years ago, I never would have imagined we'd be where we are with issues like the LGBTQ plus community, or with, well, you know, just the proliferation of pornography and things like that, the accessibility of it. The world is just a different place than it was. I mean, and the biggest one of all, of course, is Fortnite, right? It's funny. You guys Fortnite people here? I brought up Fortnite in the first presentation. There was nobody under like 40 there, and they were all like, we don't know what Fortnite is. We've never heard of it. I was like, well, it is taking over my son's world, so I know what it is. You know, like today I was like, no Fortnite of any kind, and he's like, well, can I play with my Fortnite Nerf guns? And I was like, okay, yes, I guess that's one version of Fortnite you can use, but still. And then he acts like I've taken away, you know, the air he breathes. He's like, oh, am I supposed to live today? I'm like, you'll do just fine. I often tell my son, I often tell him, I say, one of the gifts I'm going to give you as a father is how to know how to be bored. Like, I'm just going to give you the gift of boredom.
Amen.
Yeah, right? And he hates me for it right now. He's like, it's not a gift, Dad, it's a curse. I'm like, you wait. Because when you're a grown-up who can sit without a phone in his hands and just enjoy the world as it goes by, you're going to be thanking me. I hope. Did you know that the average iPhone user touches their phone 2,617 times per day and spends 2.5 hours on it? Now think about that. That's the average. So teenagers are probably close to about 5,000 touches of their phones per day.
That's my nephew.
Yeah.
Yeah, he's 17, he reads on it all the time.
Yeah, and I mean, I get it in a way, right? Because with the phone and the TV and all these other things used to be for us, it's all on the phone for you guys. Like, I've never once watched a movie on my phone or a show, and yet I watch people doing that all the time. Like, I'm just like, why would you watch a small screen when you can have a bigger one? It just doesn't make sense to me. But it's like the convenience of it, all those things. And the point is, it's in our hands all the time. My wife Courtney liked my quote, so I'm quoting myself, but I think really clocks and light bulbs ruin the world. Every once in a while, I not so jokingly pray for like an EMP or something to go off. If it weren't for the fact that so many people would die because we didn't have heat and cool, I think it'd be kind of nice if all of a sudden electricity didn't exist for a while and we could just get back to looking each other in the eyes.
So the younger generation wouldn't know what to do?
I'm not sure I'd know what to do. I mean, you know, I say that, but the fact is, if I had to forage for my own food and, you know, kill animals and grow crops and things, I'd probably starve and die with the rest of you. So, so we're asking ourselves how we got here. Look at this guy. I don't know how you get that look at that age, but I hope he never loses it. Look at this. This is hilarious to me. A 1967 Senate subcommittee studying the future was warned that because of technological advances, by 1985, the average person would work only 22 hours a week and work only 27 weeks a year. I mean, they thought that the toaster and the microwave and eventually things like the smartphone would free us up to pursue the things we want. And instead, what has happened is,
It's made it worse.
well, it's made it worse because of human nature, right? We tend to be so acquisitional and we tend to want to do the next thing, to become the next person, to do, to like more. And so, I mean, perhaps we'd have more time, I don't know. I also read that, what was it, like as recently as 25 or 30 years ago, people took like 4 weeks more vacation than they do now. I forget, I heard a statistic recently that something like half, I forget what percentage of people take less than a week of vacation a year. Is it any wonder that we are the way we are, or the way John Mark Comer asks it? What is all this distraction, addiction, and pace of life doing to our souls? What time am I supposed to be done, by the way? Is it 1:05? 1:05. Oh, good. Perfect, we're on pace. So I'd asked you guys earlier to kind of self-report on how you were doing, but let's just do a quick symptom check, just in case some of us maybe let ourselves off the hook too easily, or maybe we're too hard on ourselves. Here's a few signs that we're living a hurried life, a list of 10 things, and just in your head, keep track. Keep track of how many of these things fit you, and you'll get a sense of whether you're living in a hurry or not. So here's a few things. They're kind of hard to read, so I'll do my best here. Irritability. So do you regularly find yourself short-tempered, or sorry, I meant to change that in between, or impatient?
Does that matter if we're driving or not?
Yes, it does. In fact, that's a good sense. You're anticipating I'm going to head eventually.
You got that.
Yeah.
He's running it out though, this is a fast-paced world nowadays.
Yeah.
You're down the road, you gotta drive more than one time, 'cause you got all these idiots that think they gotta be there right away.
Right, and they're all thinking the same thing about
Yeah.
you.
Yeah,
That's the thing,
right.
right?
Yeah,
Right.
exactly, it works both ways.
And I drive slower so I can read my emails.
Right. That's good thinking.
I mean, multitasking.
Yeah, right, yeah, that's good. At least you slow down.
Unless he's behind and he's just,
Right.
or going off.
Yeah. Yeah, all right. How about hypersensitivity? Do little things become big things regularly in your life? Restlessness. Do you find it difficult to quiet your body and mind? How many of us, when we lay down in bed at night, lay down with a quiet heart and a quiet mind, ready to just rest? Workaholism or nonstop activity. Do you measure success by accomplishment? Again, I think this is one of the besetting sins of Ortberg. I think we have several. Vanity is a besetting sin at Ortberg. We tend to be so concerned with how we look and how, I mean, I once wrote an article about how few dandelions there are on yards. Have you noticed? Nobody mows their yard side to side. It's diagonal up in this house, you know what I'm saying? Like, and then you cross hatch it, right? And then you can go the other way because you're cross hatching the crosshatch, of course, but so few people would ever think about doing what I used to do, which is just go around and around till it was done and forget the rest, like it's cut, let's move on. Are you keeping track? So we've had 4, here's another one. Emotional numbness. Do you lack empathy? Are you annoyed by the pain of others? I'll confess to you that even as a pastor, I can sometimes get annoyed at the pain of others. There are times when it just feels like an interruption to my day. Like, I've got things to do. Why don't you take care of your own crisis and come back to me when it's over, and then I'll pastor you in that place. That's no help at all, is it? Out of order priorities. Do we succumb to the tyranny of the urgent? Are we reactive to things? Are we constantly like just putting out brush fires all over the place? Lack of care for your body. Are you overweight? Are you always tired? Do you eat bad food? Are we sedentary? Again, keep track. Escapist behaviors. Do you binge on Netflix? Do you drink a bunch of alcohol? Do you watch porn all the time? Are you overeating? How do you deal with anxiety? I mean, these are symptoms of a hurried life. A couple more. Keep track of which ones. Slippage of spiritual disciplines. Have your healthy spiritual habits been crowded out? Do you mistake the gift for the giver? That is, there have been times in my life where I've had some good spiritual habits, and I start to feel that sense of like walking in God's will, and then I stop doing the habit because I'm just enamored with walking in God's will, and then pretty soon that slips because I'm no longer doing the discipline that got me there. And then finally, isolation. Do you find yourself avoiding company or friends, or do you find yourself on a phone even in a crowded place? I was saying in the previous presentation how I was at the airport in Chicago this week. Happened to get there several hours ahead of time because traffic and who knows, and I'd just rather be sitting there than in traffic. I didn't have my phone, and I'm just watching the world go by, and literally every single person, phone in hand, screen, something. Nobody's smiling, nobody's making eye contact, nobody wants to have conversations. And I get it, I'm a stranger to them, I'm not looking to be their best friend, but it'd be nice to have a little human interaction sometimes, like the lady in Sockville. So how many out of 10, right? I don't have a number for you of like what the number is that makes it bad. I don't know. I'll tell you this, on this next list, here's another quick one. Just if you've made that list and you think you're okay, I think this one's gonna get most of us, because when other people are talking, how do you handle that? And this list, the guy said if you get more than 2, you're living hurried. All right, so watch this. When other people are talking, do you finish their sentences? Do you give your opinion before hearing them out? Do you get restless or impatient? Do you lose track of what they're saying? Do you rehearse what you're gonna say next? Do you take control of the conversation? Do you interrupt with frequent comments or questions? Do you try and diagnose and help them fix their problems? Do you worry about what you're gonna say next or suspiciously listen for hidden agendas? It's like 10 out of 10 for me most days, right? Realistically, it's like 10 out of 10. I was talking with a man downstairs, a man named Don, I hadn't met before, and he was talking about ministry, and he said he would often kind of do street evangelism. And I said, I'm discovering in my life that if I will just listen to someone with patience and love, more often than not, they open their life up to me. And then once they open their life up to me, and I listen with patience and love, they are open to hearing what I have to say in return. It's like magic. It's so simple. And it just has to do with being unhurried in my conversations. If I just will take time to sit and be present with them. In fact, here's a saying I'll share here, because I feel like I need to do the t-shirt, especially now that it's going to be broadcast on your website or something, right? Because I need to go trademark it real quick. Because I think I came up with this. I'll share it freely, though. Freely given to me, I suppose I'll freely share it. We have a saying in my household. We say, be nowhere but here and do nothing but this. Be nowhere but here, do nothing but this. And it's just our way, it's like my mindfulness campaign. It's just a way of saying, and it's what I do with people. Right? It's what I'm trying to do right now. I'm not trying to think about how the presentation is going to end or where I'm going to go or what's on the next slide. I'm trying as much as I can every moment to be present right here. I'm not trying to be anywhere else. I'm not trying to worry about Hilbert and where that is and how I'm going to get my son there in time for 2 basketball games. That'll happen or it won't. And I can't control that. Not from here. And I'm going to say, and do nothing but this. Don't try and watch myself while I'm speaking. Don't try and think about a sermon for another day. Just do this presentation right now. And again, I'm finding that if I'll be nowhere but here and do nothing but this with people, they just open their hearts to me. Not all of them. Some of them are not that interested, fine. How many out of 10 though, right? I think it reminds me of a story I heard. Actually, I think it's from this book, if I remember correctly. It talks about how a British man went during kind of colonial era, like 1800s. He went to the continent of Africa, to one of the British colonies there, and he hired a crew of locals, to porters and guides and things, to carry his stuff and take him out into the jungle. And he said that first day, the story goes, the first day they plowed like 20 miles of territory. They just cut out right through into the bush. They get about 20 miles in, they camp for the night and get up the next morning, and the British explorer puts his pith helmet back on and his khakis back on and his black boots back on, you know, and he's ready to go and conquer another 20 miles for the day. And the story says that all the locals, all the Africans, refused to budge. They wouldn't pick up his stuff, they wouldn't stand up, they wouldn't get a move on. It didn't matter whether he told them or bribed them or yelled at them, it didn't matter. He finally asked the interpreter, he says, why won't they move? The story said, the guy says, they're waiting for their souls to catch up with their bodies. I just think these Africans in this story have this profound sense of what it is to be human and to live at a sustainable pace, right? To live in a way that allows for us to be present in every moment. I think about my own life, how often I'm living out of phase with where I am. I'm either stuck in the past on some wrong I haven't righted yet, you know, something I said I need to apologize for, or something that was done to me that I feel like somebody else ought to apologize for before I can move on in a healthy way, and I'm going to hold them to that. Or I'm living out ahead, thinking about something I have yet to do, something on my schedule, something I know I'm going to need to take care of. And rather than being in phase with my body right here, right now, I'm either back there or out there. Think about how much of my life I live that way. How much of your life do you live out of phase with what's happening right in front of you, right in that moment? I think so many of us live that way. Here's how I'd say this. We are constantly outpacing our souls. And because we outpace our souls, we outpace the Spirit of God. Because the Spirit of God communes with our souls. And if we're not connected to our soul, if it's out back there, out up there, how is God supposed to commune with us in that place? Is it any wonder that our lives lack love and joy and peace? In fact, I'd say it this way, love and hurry are incompatible. They cannot live together. Joy and hurry are incompatible. They cannot live together. Peace and hurry cannot live together. These things that God wants for us, this love, this joy, this peace, the fruits of the Spirit, patience, kindness, goodness, gentleness, faithfulness, and self-control, these things cannot exist in a state of hurry. They just can't. We fool ourselves if we think they can. They will suffocate, they will die on the vine if we're in a hurry. So then the question is, what can we do? What do we do about all this? If we're people, if we're like the fish who are like, what's water? I didn't even know I was in such a hurry. I've just imbibed it. I've just become so much a part of the world that I live at this pace that's unsustainable. What do? Well, lo and behold, we walk at the pace of Jesus. You know what's interesting to me, brothers, is that it is so fascinating to me how many of us as Christians will be quick to quote the Bible, quick to quote Jesus, want to talk about all that Jesus means to us and all that he says. And so we're happy to use his words, but when he invites us to walk at his pace, we think he's a fool in our hearts. Because we tell ourselves that, well, Jesus didn't live in the 21st century. Jesus didn't live with the internet. Jesus didn't have cars. So of course he'd live at a hurried pace today. Let's not fool ourselves. He'd leave behind all that slowness and just rush the way we do. I think that's, without actually telling ourselves that, we tell ourselves that. It's fascinating to me. I'll just speak personally. It has been such a deep conviction in my heart how I've let myself off the hook when it came to living the life of Jesus. I'll gladly quote his words, but when it comes to living his life, I have just thought, oh, that's for another person. That's for another era. That's for another day. But Jesus invites us into this pace over and over and over again. Think about the Sermon on the Mount. In the build-up to Matthew 6:33, where he says, seek first the kingdom of God and his righteousness, and everything will be added. As illustrations, he says, look at the birds of the air, how God feeds them. Look at the flowers of the field, how God clothes them. Now here's what's fascinating to me. For the first time, I was invited into just to picture the actual sermon that Jesus is preaching and think to myself, when he got to this part of the sermon, can you imagine him just calmly, kind of in an unhurried way, saying to all the people gathered, like, look at the birds of the air. And everyone actually turns and looks at the birds of the air and takes a little time to reflect on them. And then he says, and look at the flowers of the field, and everyone looks. And they take a little bit of time to ponder the flowers of the field. I think to myself, just built into his sermons even. I don't know, I guess, do you picture when you read the Sermon on the Mount that he just sort of spouted it all so that, I mean, I think that's, as short as that sermon is, written out, all but it took a while to deliver. Or think about this one. The Bible says that Jesus regularly got away and spent all night alone in prayer. Not just every once in a while. It doesn't say that this was like when bad times hit or he knew that some big, ministry push was coming up. It said as a practice, the Bible says, he would set time aside and get away. This may be my favorite illustration. When his friend Lazarus dies, Jesus takes days to respond. He could have gotten there in time. I mean, that's the implication of the scriptures, is that he hears in time. And if he'd hurried, he could have gotten there. But instead, Jesus takes days of unhurried time. And when he finally arrives, I think it's Martha who says to him, if you'd been here earlier. And what's interesting to me is, I bet none of us have ever read that story and thought it would be okay for us to miss a friend's funeral. So why is it okay for Jesus to miss a friend's funeral, but somehow we would ruin the world if we did? Now, I'll grant that I think Jesus probably had some sense that he was going to use the funeral of Lazarus or his death and the tomb as an example of what he was going to go through. And it might be a bit presumptuous of us to try and do the same, and yet there's 4 habits that Jesus has in his walk, at his pace. I think if we will implement these habits, it will help us. This is not a panacea. Panacea just means like this isn't a cure-all. It's not like if you do these things, it's just automatic. In the few minutes I have left, I'll do my best to unpack these a little bit and then paint a picture for us at the end. So I'm going to go kind of quickly through these. I don't think any of them will be new, but the interesting thing about being a pastor, I suppose the longer I do it, the more I realize there's really nothing new I have to tell anybody. I may say it in an interesting way. I might be the first guy with a mohawk you've heard it from, but what I have to say is not really special, right? These are not things that are new to me. These are disciplines, these are practices, these are habits that Christians and people of all faiths from all around the world have been doing for a long time, because they recognize, that the wise among us recognize their capacity to empower us to live the way we're supposed to. So the quiet place, a practice of silence and solitude. I mean, let me just tell you guys, at 14, 15, if you could begin to practice this today, I mean, it's going to be harder for you guys. I was at a Dave & Buster's in New Orleans this week. You talk about hell on earth. Dave & Buster's, oh my gosh. The noise, the lights, everything about it, but I'll bet you guys would have loved it. You're just used to that stuff. And I think to myself, how amazing would it be if you guys, especially, but all of us, regularly got away to a place where there was genuine silence, where we were by ourselves, and in an unhurried way, read God's Word. Henry Nouwen says this: we do not take the spiritual life seriously. I'll just let that sink in for a minute. Here's a man of great faith who says we don't even take it seriously if we don't set aside time to be with God and listen to Him. Listen, brothers, if you don't set aside time to listen, to be with God and listen to Him, you're not taking your spiritual life seriously. There's no 2 ways around it. There's no excuse. You can't tell yourself that, oh, I don't do it, but I do take my spiritual life seriously. You don't. We don't, if we don't do this. The quiet day, the Sabbath. Oh man, I'm running out of time. There's so much good material. I'll just start talking faster. I was really trying to be unhurried about it, but there's good material. The Jewish day started in the evening, right? When God created the world, He said there was evening and it was morning, day 1. It was evening, it was morning, day 2. It was evening, it was morning, day 3. To this day, Jews consider the start of the day to be sunset. What that means is, after our evening meal, the first thing we do is rest. We close our eyes and we say to God, you take care of everything, even my breathing, while I just spend time unconscious for however many hours. And then we wake up and the day's half done. And that act of faith of saying, God, we're going to trust you at the start of our day to take care of everything, and then we're going to wake up halfway through it and do what we can, that's how we're intended to think about it. And our day is meant to start, our week is meant to start with a Sabbath rest. So our week starts with Sabbath and our day starts with rest. That's the biblical image. The one thing, simplicity. Jesus says life does not consist in an abundance of possessions. So how can we be simplifying our lives? That's a practice that Jesus clearly did. And then the fourth one, the slow waiting on purpose. John Ortberg puts it this way: we cultivate patience by deliberately choosing to place ourselves in positions where we simply have to wait. A good example of this, a simple one, would be next time you go to the grocery store or any store, get in the longest line. And just make it your habit every single time to choose the longest line and stay there. And don't be on your phone. Don't distract yourself with the magazines. Just stand in the line and be.
Yeah, you're funny.
I'm about to get funnier. So here's your assignment for the week, which again, this is what I said to you guys. So for 1 week, here's what I'm inviting you to do. If you think that you have this beat, or if you're ready to know just how hurried a life you live, right, this is funny because in a room full of men, this one's going to hit home for most of us. I'll tell you that 11 years ago, when I first heard about that conversation between Ortberg and Willard, the first thing I decided to do as a way of practicing what I was preaching was I started driving the speed limit. When I'm in town, this is what I said earlier, I said I love my Honda because Honda is the only manufacturer I know where the cruise control goes all the way down to 25 miles an hour. So I'm on Center Avenue, I get to 25, I push cruise and I just go. And then when I get out to the edge of town, I go to 35 and I push my cruise control. And by I-43, I've got like 12 cars behind me, all of them anxiously looking in my rearview mirror, wondering what on earth I'm doing going that slow. Are you the one on my tail? I'm the guy you're mad at. Well, here's the deal, brother, I'm trying to help you. I mean, you know what's funny is that what the discipline will do very quickly is help you decide whether other people's stress has got to be yours too. Because when they're glaring at you with hate-filled eyes in your rearview mirror, you get to decide, is their stress going to be my stress today? Does their hurry have to be my hurry today? Does their rush need to be my rush today? Sometimes you really feel like it needs to be because they look so mad. And you decide, every once in a while I just pull over to the side of the road and let them all pass because I'm like, you look like you're really in a hurry, brother, and I don't want to be the one to do this to you. But or drive the speed limit. So I put these, so don't pass any car on the road. I did this from Chicago a couple weeks ago. I got in the slow lane and I decided I was going to be the slowest car on the road the entire drive back from Chicago. Wow. You know what I've discovered? What I've discovered about driving the speed limit is that when I arrive at my destination, I'm loving, I'm at peace, there's joy in my heart. I don't run in like I'm bat out of hell or a chicken with my head cut off. I get there when I get there. You want to know another good discipline? Drive the speed limit when you're late somewhere. That'll challenge you too. Because then you get to decide what's more important. Is it more important that I, quote, get there on time, which you probably won't anyways, and all you're going to do is walk in 2 minutes late instead of 4 minutes late, and you're going to walk in stressed and anxious and overworked, or you can show up 4 minutes late at peace, and you can apologize if you want or not. Let me finish with a quote from this book that I think will just paint a little picture for us of what at least this guy John Mark Comer was thinking when he wrote it. He's a guy who was pastoring a mega church in his mid-20s. He was pastoring a church with 5 campuses and thousands of people. He was living the kind of pastor's dream of making it. And he said he reached a point where he realized that it was just an unsustainable life. And he said that he went to his leaders and he gave up the big suburban church and went to the little one they had just planted in the city. And he said, I end my 10-year run at the church. My family and I take a sabbatical. It's a sheer act of grace. I spend the first half comatose. And by the way, as a pastor who just had a sabbatical this last week, whatever church you belong to, if your pastor has been there more than about 6 or 7 years, please grant them a sabbatical. That is typically about a 3-month time of rest and relaxation where you continue to pay them. I'm telling you, it's changed my life. I wouldn't be the man I am today if it weren't for those 3 months. feeling he'd say the same. In fact, it was about week 6, I realized that for the first time in 10 years, I didn't have low-grade stress in my back. I had just gotten so used to the stress I was under that I didn't even think about it. It was like a fish in water. It wasn't until weeks into it of not doing anything, well, like not working, that I realized, like, oh man, life can be this way. And right, life isn't a long sabbatical, I get that. But, so he says it like this, he says, I spend the first half comatose, but slowly I wake back up to my soul. I come back to a much smaller church, we move into the city, I walk to work. I start therapy. One word, wow. Turns out I need a lot of it. I focus on emotional health, work fewer hours, date my wife, play Star Wars Legos with my kids, practice Sabbath, detox from Netflix, start reading fiction for the first time since high school, walk the dog before bed, live. Sounds great, right? Utopian even. I feel more like a drug addict coming off meth. Who am I without the big church, a queue of people, a late night email flurry, he says, a life of speed isn't easy to walk away from. But in time I detox. I feel my soul open up. Change is slow, gradual, and intermittent. He says, I feel like my best self, more like Jesus. I feel my own soul, and then he ends this introduction this way, also I'll leave us with. He says, I'm on the unpaved road with no clue where it leads, but that's okay. I honestly value who I'm becoming over where I end up, and for the first time in years, I'm smiling at the horizon. That's a lot to take in at 14 and 15, I get, but the old guys are nodding their heads. So trust that. So brothers, thank you. I just pray that, for whatever extent I can have convinced you that living in an unhurried way is the better way. I'm telling you, I'm trying to live that myself, and to what extent I am, it's true. Okay? Thanks for being here. Appreciate it.